Hello, and welcome back to a new episode of the Security Break podcast. I'm Giorgio, and this is a little project of mine where I invite cool people like Chuck today from the cybersecurity field to have a little conversation on some of the latest, stories from the field, so we can all learn something about it. Hi, Chuck. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's very cool. Probably most of the people watching this already know you, but would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Chuck Brooks, and I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. A lot of you know me from LinkedIn, where I have 120,000 followers on my profile. But my background has been in government, Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Senate, and in industry with General Dynamics, Xerox, and other companies. And I'm a professor at Georgetown University, where I teach cybersecurity risk management, and I also write for Forbes and a bunch of other publications.
That's very cool. That's very nice. I'm always, a little bit, definitely glad that I get to talk with a lot of, people with a lot of experience from the field, and especially with different backgrounds, right? And different, kind of knowledge base that I know it's helping me growing and knowing a little more, and hopefully also the people that will watch and listen to this. It's a little reminder for everyone: you're watching this live on YouTube, but the video will remain available. So consider maybe subscribing, sharing this with a friend, and possibly having a look at all of the previous episodes with a lot of other very incredible guests. And if you prefer maybe listen to podcasts instead of watching, this will be available also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for that. And with that said, I'll jump into the first news for today. If you give me just a second. So where is my screen? Just a second. Okay, so here it is. Okay. So hopefully everyone is able to see my screen right now. This is the first news for today. We have 3 of them, and we will try to jump on every of them and have a talk about all of them briefly. So the first one, probably everyone here has, heard about, the recent attack on, Donald Trump, and the fact that there was a shooter in there, and that he was actually killed in the process. What is interesting for us right now is the fact that the FBI actually collected the phone of the person that tried to attack the former president, and the goal was to collect information about the attacker, knowing about the reasoning behind the attack, and possibly preventing further attacks. The thing was that the person actually had a pretty recent phone, and they struggled to get access to it because it was protected by a password. So they eventually, requested. First, they tried on their own to use the famous Cellebrite software to get access to the phone, but they were unsuccessful. Sorry for that. For which reason they actually reached out directly to the Cellebrite support, and eventually got an unknown or just not yet published update for the software, which granted them the ability to eventually access the phone in just 40 minutes. Now, this is everything for the introduction. What I would like to focus on, if you agree with this, Chuck, is, well, first, maybe not everyone is aware of the fact that there are companies out there which help, getting access to blocked phones, right? And, the thing that, it can be definitely challenging on some scenarios. And at the same time, when you have the right software, the right maybe exploit, the thing is that it's pretty fast to get, to breach those security measures that we think get us secure on a personal basis, right? So I want to hear your first thoughts about this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not the first time that there's been a problem with law enforcement trying to get into phones. If you remember a few years back in California, there was a terrorist shooting. A bunch of people were shot, and they got one of the perpetrators' phones, but they couldn't open it, and they didn't get permission from, I think it was an Apple phone at the time, to do it. So they had to call in. Again, Cellebrite came in and did it. But it's really, I have to commend them that they're really the top firm when it comes to this type of thing of breaking passwords. And what is really interesting now, I think, is because the technology's evolved so much, particularly in encryption, the challenges are even greater to break these passwords. And you also have the one thing, the technical issue, which Cellebrite's mastered, but in some places you also have the privacy issue. There's a lot of companies out there that still say that it's, if it's a private device, then we're not going to, cross that line. However, I mean, this is a domestic terrorist incident, attempted assassination of a president. And just like the other incident was a terrorist incident where they shot former coworkers. These kind of situations, I think, warrant waiving any privacy concerns. And I was really happy to see the capabilities. And again, you aptly pointed out that there was an upgrade in the software because they didn't have the latest and greatest. But I know Cellebrite now has expanded. I think they just recently bought another company here in the U.S. where they're doing a lot of, I think, almost 20% of the federal law enforcement agencies now helping them. So I think this is just a sign of things to come. It's going to be not only dealing with these kind of crimes, which are the most severe, but also with counterfeiting, with cryptocurrency, with ransomware, all these type of things that may involve breaking a password and getting into the phone. In fact, a lot of people have lost their fortunes by not being able to remember their password in cryptocurrency. So that's another use of that.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. We actually spoke about similar scenarios in the previous episode. So if you're interested, maybe go have a watch on those. So you definitely said a couple of different interesting things in there, and the fact that probably Cellebrite is one of the most famous companies when it takes to this kind of software. There are of course competitors, but for my perception, when it comes especially to mobile devices, Cellebrite is one of the most used and most famous ones, and they are very recurrently in the news for these very big cases, right? Which is, I mean, it could be good for them for a marketing point of view, I guess.
Yeah.
And a remarkable thing was that once again the attacker actually had a pretty new phone that was not originally supported by the current version of the software. Still, they were ready to release a software in a very timely manner, right? And this, for me, from my point of view, demonstrates maybe two different things. Either their capabilities in finding new exploits or new ways to bypass security measures is very, very high and very, very effective. And at the same time, it's probably true that they had it ready and just not published yet, right? Maybe they were testing it internally and they just decided that because of the special case here, I thought it was worth just to try it on production, let's say. But that says a lot of it, right? The fact that even a phone that is very, brand new, right, with the latest security patches, can still be, pretty easily, let's say, attacked and accessed in this way. At the same time, this is not a software that everyone has access to, right? So the privacy concern is that really something that someone should be, concerned about?
I think, first of all, I don't really think there is much privacy anymore in anything digital.
That's true.
There's someone in your network already. And if they want to hear and get anything about you, they can. It depends how sophisticated they are, but there's so many tools out there, and there's so many capable, criminal gangs and actually governments that can do this. So, that whole issue, it's maybe really more relevant to marketing when they steal your information and try and sell to you. But in a criminal enterprise, again, I think this is, definitely warranted when you have life's in danger or have a violent crime. I think it's a different category. And, I know GDPR and other, rulings in Europe have a really strong feeling about privacy. But I think with counterterrorism now, and you're seeing what happened now in Paris with a lot of the trains being taken down, et cetera, today, it's a new world out there. And it's not just physical. It's a lot of this is coordinated digitally. And I think intelligence and law enforcement communities are going to be more and more apt to use these type of techniques and algorithms and capabilities that Cellebrite and others have. So I think, it really goes into splitting the atom here.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually agree with you, right? There are, in this specific scenario, that's, let's say, the first concern is not really granting the the privacy of that specific person that is being targeted for a quite good reason in this point of view. And what I was thinking about is the thing that Cellebrite, even being of course kind of a legitimate company, right? It's definitely using some vulnerabilities, right, in the software and hardware that we all use, right? And they probably both develop this on on their own, find these vulnerabilities with their capabilities, and we also know there's a pretty big market for vulnerabilities themselves, right? That as a company in this business, I of course this is just guessing, right? This is just some assumptions, but you probably have to even considering at some point buying from the market some vulnerabilities from third parties in order to be able to access some specific devices in some specific scenarios. Yeah. And that market is something that, of course, needs a lot of possibly, I don't know, regulation, but that's something that probably we should just be aware of it as a community, right? Yes. The fact that with money, of course, a lot of money, but technically any device can be breached, right?
Exactly. And also, when you talk about regulation, even in any digital regulation, you're talking about a global issue, and there's really not a lot of consensus or cooperation yet, particularly in large parts of the world, of whether they're going to enforce that regulation. So, a lot of the criminals operate in their own independent way or in conjunction with other countries or gangs, and there's no real interest in really subduing them. So I think, this kind of thing is difficult to regulate in terms of privacy. I can see it being done, by states in the U.S. and perhaps by countries or the EU in different ways, but particularly when it's used for wrong purposes. But I think you have to have again the separate law enforcement counterterrorism aspects separately. And I think another point you brought up, which is really good, is that the software a lot of these companies basically license and market are not necessarily their best capabilities. They have different levels, and I think Cellebrite's one of them. They have stuff that they probably only make available to certain governments under license, and also it's monitored by these governments that buy it for special uses because they don't want it in the public. So I think that's just true of a lot of offerings in the cyber world. There's stuff that has both offensive and defensive capabilities that some companies just don't want to share as in an open marketplace.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate what you just mentioned, right? Companies like Cellebrite are basically, I think we can call it the digital forensics market, right? Where they develop this kind of software and hardware for mainly for law enforcement and intelligence agencies, uh, and for even those professionals who are working on some cases in court.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's tailored to the use.
Yeah, absolutely. They are using this software to extract data, analyze that, and try to define whether there actually was a crime happening or not. So there's definitely a legitimate usage for this kind of software. And unfortunately, I mean, depending on the side of the thing, luckily we have security measures that prevent unwanted access to our devices, which means we need for this special scenarios some software to circumvent those security measures. So that's the first and principal use case for these companies, which should not be a concern for the entire community privacy, right? But still,
Right.
I understand why it rises the kind of conversation, right?
Exactly. No, I think the environment is there's a lot of layers here, and just like in cybersecurity, so in privacy and in operational aspects to it. So I think you're exactly right.
So that's perfect. Now I think that's pretty much all it was interesting regarding this news. Like I said, every time in every episode, there we could probably speak about every news for even hours if we want.
Yes.
But one of the goals of this project is to actually help providing different stories that could be helpful in order to keep you updated in the field and maybe learn something new, which is the reason why I'm going to jump on the next one. And this is another pretty even that we are all aware of around the world, the fact that there are the French Olympics at the moment, right? It's a global event that it's considered very, very important on for the country that is hosting it, but also for all of the other countries that are sending their athletes to compete in this kind of event. And because it is important, of course, it takes a lot of attention from all of the different parties, and of course also from malicious actors as well. It happened in the past multiple times, and apparently even this time something is happening. We actually have more recent news, like I think from today there's a lot going on. But what we are referring to at the moment are some news from last week, I believe, where some of the most important touristic related websites in Paris and in France were targeted by some DDoS attacks, what we usually refer as distributed denial of service attacks. So those type of attacks where we are trying to shut down or just block completely the service that is being offered by server or the computer. There's been a lot of discussion about this specific attack. There's some interesting comments in the news itself. And by the way, I always invite everyone to just go and read the news yourself, because you can make your own opinion and maybe come back with a comment and let us know what you think about it. So you can find the links in the description of the video. Some of those comments I've read in the news, is from some, a spokesperson from, I think, Cybel, a security and intelligence company, that is attributing this kind of attack to something that, it's mostly associated with hacktivists, so attackers with, maybe political or just, some social goals and reasoning behind their own attacks. And it's pointing out the fact that it's maybe not that much a problem by itself, this type of attack, rather than the fact that it could be used to hide some most problematic attacks. So maybe I'm using the DDoS to distract you, to distract the organization, and maybe at the same time there's some of my colleagues that are trying to, I don't know, get the access to the network via exploiting some vulnerabilities or something else. So I want to talk a little bit about this kind of attacks in this context, and the fact that it's not that cool anymore. We don't speak about DDoS so much nowadays after the ransomware rise, right? But it's still a thing.
Yeah, it definitely is still a thing. I mean, you're right. And I think the reason we don't talk about it so much is we have better remedies now to stop DDoS attacks than we did in the past. And but that doesn't mean there's not a big threat. And they're still now being enabled now by AI with bots and stuff to make it easier. But there's ways to better firewall a lot of these websites and protect. And I think you hit those types of attacks now are more sort of the activist attacks. You see the takeover of the websites, particularly in Europe has the big environmental movement that's been very strong in Europe. It's a nuisance at the very least. It can be cause actually harm when it comes to informational aspects. If you're able to take down the actual Olympic website where you go to venues, how you do it, you could cause all kinds of confusions. But most of these have been lesser kinds of attacks. But again, you can never underestimate it. And I think part of the preparation that's gone into this Olympics is lessons learned from the past from UK and other places where they've had a lot of digital threats. And I think they've bolstered a lot of this capability. And I think a lot of the effort now, it's still digital, but it's being put into surveillance. This has really become a surveillance world, and for good reason, because the surveillance prevents the physical from melding with the digital. And you have intercept the communications and know the whereabouts of things through these cameras and digital spying. You're able to thwart a lot of the attacks, whether they be from hacktivists, from environmental groups, or actually from real physical threats from terrorists and others. So I think it's too early to be seen, but I mean I think more current what happened today. I think the disruption of the rail lines and disruption of the airports were very very sad to see. And part of that is, with the airports, all they can do is call in a threat. That's not necessarily that there was a threat. So, I mean, it shows the precariousness of the world we live in right now, where actually information and manipulation of information and even threats can have a domino effect. And that is the real threat. And really, what DDoS attacks are domino threats and their basics. I mean, they're basically putting together a whole bunch of different devices and overloading a system. So they're pretty much doing that beyond the DDoS now, but it's still digital.
You definitely hit the spot, right? The fact that we are so vulnerable to this kind of outages, since basically everything is now based on IT environments, and this is exactly what DDoS attacks are aiming to, right? If I run one of these attacks and I basically run your resources out of resources. Sorry for the wording. The thing is that you or your network, your infrastructure is not able anymore to provide the same service or the same level or quality of service that is normally doing. And we have to think that that could potentially, this was not the case right now, but potentially it could affect anything like physical access to sites, the physical sites. If you have to provide a badge or something to get into it, maybe anything like the big screens to stream the event that is going on right now. So the thing is, it could be very very disruptive in a scenario like this. And that's the other kind of topic I wanted to touch with you. The thing that normally when we speak about, cyber threats, right, we normally think about companies, okay, and how those type of organizations are targeted. And I don't think we always take into consideration that big events like this are basically big organization, as big and as complex as one of the biggest, big tech companies, right? Because of all the people, all the money involved, and all the expectations for something like this that is happening just one every 4 years, but for a specific country, possibly one every, I don't know, multiple years, right? And that's the thing. Don't you think so?
Yeah, no, I mean this is a special event, like just much like be the Super Bowl here or the football over in Europe, where you have a viewing audience, you have a lot of people, a lot of venues, hotels, restaurants, everything dependent upon the revenues and the interaction of the people. So it's very complex, and a lot of these smaller businesses are associated with it don't have the resources, to protect themselves against a lot of these digital attacks, or the expertise. So, I mean, when you're speaking of DDoS, you look at corporations. Usually, they have the tools, they buy them. They've already learned from lessons, particularly in the financial communities, of how they're used. But a lot of the world doesn't have that capability. Now, hopefully, the French recognize this as a vulnerability and a gap, and went in and reinforced a lot of this and is helping it, because this is really an example of a public-private partnership. And it's not just the French government; it's the Olympic Committee, it's a lot of other countries helping and assisting. And hopefully they've assembled a great team of both physical and digital security experts, because again, they're intertwined now. There's no longer a separation, and they did their vulnerability assessments, and they know the risks. And despite having said all that, you see that there's disruption today, and that's just the thing about security, is that there's no such thing as absolute security. So you almost have to look at the next step, which is resiliency. And how you get beyond one incident does happen, because it will happen. I mean, there's too many people involved, and too many people to surveil. So there's so many elements going into the security operations. So I think this is Olympics are a great example of the type of preparation that's needed, and going to be more needed as we get more and more sophisticated attacks from the digital realm, and also the physical threats aren't going away either.
Absolutely, and just to add a bit to the comparison with let's say normal, or what we used to call a company or organization, and an event like this, from my point of view, is the fact that they don't have the same time. Let's say that they could potentially have the same resources in terms of money, expertise, and whatever. But at the same time, you have to build up an entire infrastructure and to secure it with very high standards in a very, a limited amount of time. And the other aspect of it is that at the same time, this is something that, as we said at the beginning, brings a lot of attention, right? It's like one of the most exposed companies out there, right? It's not about, the companies that no one knows about, and maybe it's targeted because you're just one of the others. You'll be targeted for sure at some point, but you're not targeted as the most famous brand out there. And this is definitely comparable to one of the most famous brands, right? People, absolutely, or just let's say attackers, want to target this because of the attention and all the people that are watching this, that are present on this. If attacker group X does something, everyone will know about that specific group because they did this, right? It's right. A kind of marketing thing, maybe.
Yeah, it's a badge for them to wear and attract others. And you also have, with this kind of event, you have a risk that's inherent in all big events, which is the insider threat. And it's very difficult to monitor everybody, and it could be someone part of the security apparatus that's a threat. That's just the problematic aspects of large events. And again, it's a global thing. I mean, we just had an incident here, as you said, we talked about earlier with former President Trump. I mean, the security was inept. Preparation was terrible. They had no surveillance, and you wouldn't think that coming from the Secret Service, but it shows the fallibility and why strategy and planning and continual practicing is really important in the integration, of all the threats. It should have been any pings or any, things that have happened with communications around an event need to be monitored. So just like this horrible thing that happened, the Olympics is hopefully much more, they're much more prepared because they've had years to plan this. But never underestimate, how the asymmetrical capabilities of an adversary. So that's the problem with cyber security and the problem with terrorism.
I mean, this is something that we keep saying in this podcast, but also in general in the field, that I think you mentioned also before. There's not such a thing as complete security or 100% security. Any organization can and will be at some point targeted and breached, just because it's kind of a race, right?
Yes.
The attackers are always trying to find a new way to get in, and we're trying to make the life difficult for them, basically, not the opposite. But technically, it's impossible. Technically, philosophically, maybe it's definitely impossible to prevent any type of threat. So the bigger your organization is, the more exposed is, the more threats you are actually facing. And as you said, it's a complex it's a complex world for all the people involved, all the information, all of the assets that are in there, and which makes just the challenge even bigger. So I don't like to blame. We don't do this to blame friends or the Olympics right now. We're just trying to make people aware that in any of those scenarios, even these ones, cyber threat is a very big thing nowadays, just because everyone is based on computer infrastructure, and it's a thing.
And the saying is that there are two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked already. And so, I think you're right. Everyone out there is very vulnerable. We're not fortresses into ourselves. We can do much more in cybersecurity awareness and make ourselves less of a target. And that's what the cybersecurity awareness is all about. But it's also a global issue because there are no boundaries in digital. Everyone connected could be anywhere in the world like we are. And it's a much different environment. And actually, I wrote a paper recently with the current diplomat of the Vatican, Dr. Alessio Pecorario, and we talk about creating a cybersecurity commons where we educate a lot of the world, particularly those in healthcare and other places where it's vital for human resources to operate, of what they can do to make themselves less of a target and be aware. Because I think that's part of the problem, with cybersecurity, as you said. It's just, most people don't consider all the risks out there and are unaware of what the basics they can do to prevent themselves from being hacked.
Absolutely. So once again, we need to jump to the next news. Unfortunately, because I think the topic is very, very interesting. And the next news is probably the biggest thing that happened in months or even years. But before we jump into that, for the last time, please, if you're watching this, if you think it's interesting, entertaining, or useful in any way, the only thing I'm asking, if you can subscribe and maybe share it with a friend, that's the kind of feedback I'm asking for, to understand that I should keep going on and maybe keep inviting cool people like Chuck. Maybe Chuck once again in the future, if he accepts to do it once again at some point. We'll see that. That said, we'll jump into the next and final news for today, unfortunately. And you probably already guessed from the title of the episode, which is always trying to match the most important news of the podcast. The thing is, you probably all know, because at this point, anyone, not even working in the IT and security, everyone knows what happened because they were potentially affected by it. And the thing was that if you're in the industry, you probably know about Crowdstrike, which is a company, actually delivering a lot of different products and services in the security realm. One of the, most important or just most famous is their EDR, endpoint detection and response. It is basically, let's say, a fancy name we use in the industry to call a specific software we install in every single computer or server or any device, or at least we try to put it in every device in the environment to monitor everything that is happening on every computer, trying to detect and prevent most of those attacks that are affecting those individual computers. Now, the thing that happened is that Crowdstrike released an update for their software, which was eventually pushed on globally on all of those on all of their customers, which apparently are a lot all over the world in any kind of industry. And this particular update had a bug, like every software eventually have. But the thing was that this particular bug actually interacted and caused issues on the Windows operating system, which means that eventually after the update, the computer itself shut it down and displayed the very famous blue screen of that blue screen that says something wrong happened and we don't know what to do about it, but the computer is not working anymore. Now, this is not new. As I said, bugs happens every day in every software out there, but the global usage of Crowdstrike software caused a lot of different companies out there to actually completely stop their businesses quite entirely, okay? Because at the same time, also Windows is the most used operating system out there. So that means that airports, healthcare environments, and a lot of different industries are there, most of which are critical infrastructure, were completely stuck and freezed and couldn't do any operation at all, affecting not only the companies themselves, but also all of the customers and people involved. Think about all of the people that had to take a flight that day. That was crazy. And if to make it everything worse, the only way to fix the problem at that specific time on that day was to physically go to every single computer and actually run some commands on it. And for a big organization, if you know the numbers that we're talking about, and we're talking about thousands, tens of thousands of computers, that very bad. That's very bad. So as usual, I talk too much, so I'll stop talking and see what are your first thoughts about this, because it's a very big topic, and just curious.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. It's amazing how much a few lines of code destruction can happen on an update. But that we were warned about that years back. But this is really a case study in systematic risk, and it's a lesson. It's a wake up call for the world in a sense. We haven't. There's as you said, that is still 3% of the affected computers are still not up, which is still a lot. When you're talking about businesses, and it did over $5 billion worth of damages to Fortune 500 companies. So it's costly, and of course to CrowdStrike itself, which was considered the leader in this area in EDR. Now their stock has precipitously dropped, and it's cost millions of dollars to the executives and stockholders. So it has a lot of implications, and just like that, the supply chain, the connectivity of it. And so I think one of the things is really that the importance of quality control in software. That step was missing. Because they pushed it out without testing. Usually, you would run this. Like we were talking about Cellebrite, they probably tested this new software on some beta tests before they actually wanted to go to market with it. This was not even tested with a small amount of group, and it was sent out. Now I know CrowdStrike saying that it was a EU problem because they couldn't, they're under compliance. They couldn't do certain things. They couldn't use a local. But there's a lot of excuses, but really the focus needs to be now on resilience and recovery, and making sure that you have a diverse sources now, so this doesn't happen. Again, maybe you don't want to be relying on one of the 2 or 3 companies that do this. Maybe you want to have a fail-safe of your own in there too if something happens. And you have to really look at the supply chain too. What is your supply? And really, it's probably the most important aspect in cyber right now is you're talking about the connectivity and all the vulnerabilities out there. One bad patch can affect the whole supply chain and create a lot of vulnerabilities. The interesting thing, though, this was an IT issue and not a cybersecurity issue. If it was a cyber issue, it could have been much worse. I mean, it could have taken down the more critical infrastructure, and it could have, put all kinds of bugs and stuff into it. And they're trying to now. That's the other thing. The threat actors are putting up fake websites and doing things trying to attract more people with phishing attacks to get help with this. So, this is just the nature of cybersecurity today, and the nature of the digital environment out there is full of criminals because it's easy for them to get paid and make money nowadays. So many lessons to learn. And I do want to say, though, that, I mean, CrowdStrike, at least they were transparent about it. In the past, a lot of these companies have not been. You don't know about the breaches till more damage is done. They came out immediately with it, which they should. And again, in the United States, they're required to under SEC law that was passed a year ago. But still, I mean, and they tried to do the right thing. I wouldn't say it's entirely their fault. I think it's just the way the nature of the business mechanisms were set up. And I think we have to review all that now. And any kind of risk management approach now needs to look at different things. And I think what's happening in the U.S., particularly from the government side now, being pushed on critical infrastructure, DHS, CISA, is a new look at things, which is zero trust, knowing everyone in your environment, every device, every person, and now security by design, building things up. So this could have been impacted by security design if they look at new processes to make sure that there's a redundancy to protect things and do things. So, but it really is. It is going to be a case study for a long time for IT, and hopefully the lessons learned from it will be applied quickly because again, we're incredibly vulnerable out there.
You definitely. I lost track of the different topics you mentioned that I want to speak about because all of those are very, very relevant. So I'll try my best. So the first one, which I think was very interesting, it's the fact that we're the best thing we can do is trying to find some lessons to learn right out of this. It's not about I've seen a lot of discussion online about blaming this or the other company or that one. I don't think that's very useful at this point, right? The thing was that we can definitely try to prevent similar scenarios in the future. Right? We can all do our best, and I think it was very interesting the thing about change control, right? The thing that we all have a lot of different softwares we install in our organization in every of our computers, right? And possibly every of those can cause big problems, right? CrowdStrike is, of course, let's say in a special situation because of how it interacts with the operating system, but still, every bug can cause some outages. And some interesting conversation I read is shouldn't the actual organization, individual customers of CrowdStrike have checked and tested that update on their own environment first before actually deploying it everywhere? Without knowing what's the results, right? That's one thing. What's your point in this?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think exactly. I mean, that's what they should do. But a lot of these shops are overworked and understaffed, and they tend to accept something from CrowdStrike or a Microsoft, which often has bugs, by the way. All the big tech things have patches on them almost weekly, right? Tuesday patch. So I think it's just saying, okay, well, they're big. We don't we rely on them, and so I think that's just one of the problems with cyber generally is that you can't trust anything, and I think one of the remedies maybe everyone talks about the hype of AI, but perhaps AI could play a role in this in detecting anomalies with poor code. Maybe as we're talking about quality control, and maybe we run it through an algorithm before it's deployed to make sure that the code is what it should be, in a machine learning capability or whatever. I mean, I mean, the problem is that it did so much damage so quickly. And again, it goes back to, again, just systematic risk and quality control. If you don't have that up front, it's just like you're building a building and architecture. If you don't have the architecture designed and tested before you put it out, and then what are you going to do if something, if there's a pipe that's broken or something, or electrical thing that's wrong? How do you fix that? You have to have a strategy, and this is going to get more and more become more and more of a problem as we get more and more connectivity and more companies relying on these few distributors of these capabilities, because really what they're trying to do is prevent cyber attacks, right? And instead they created a problem. So it's like a lose-lose situation here.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I think that the best outcome we can take from this is that definitely there's some kind of shared, responsibility with all of the parties involved. I'm not sure I agree, but someone even mentioned that, even the operating system is not supposed to crash because of a software that is installed on it. I mean, this is a very special scenario, so I'm not sure about that. But still, there are different parties involved, and everyone has their own, share of it. The other topic I would like to touch is, and once again, you mentioned it before, the fact that, is this a cyber incident? Is this an IT incident? There's been a lot of conversation about it. Someone has started to, cherry picking some parts of regulations to try to define what this really was, right? And the fact that, okay, this actually affected the availability of data and systems. So eventually it's actually a data breach. So what we usually refer as a cyber incident. Like, is this a conversation right to have, or does it really make a difference? And what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, no, I think that you bring up a good issue here. Really, in my opinion, almost everything's a cyber incident. However you can categorize it. Even everything with IT, because exactly what you said, if a breach happens or if misconfiguration happens, it can impact your security. In this case, it did impact a lot of the operational aspect, but it also created an opportunity for the bad guys to take advantage of a situation and hack. So, it's really a cyber environment, right? So it's all linked, So I don't think it matters so much how you categorize it, and I really think also, there's always been a lot of separation saying, well, the IT shop is different, but for most companies, the IT shop is a cyber shop. You have the person that you get hacked or you get a ransomware thing, the IT person comes and fixes it. So really, it's not much of a jump. And so I think IT and cyber are inextricably, going to be part of each other for forever. And so I don't think it doesn't matter really what you say if it's cyber. Everything is a cyber incident.
Which is interesting, right? Because the consequence of that, if this is considered a cyber incident, that also means that potentially we will have authorities investigating on this to understand whether there are fines to be attributed to some specific companies because they didn't handle the incident in the best way possible, or they did not do everything possible to try to prevent it, right? Because we said before, it's not possible to prevent everything, but at the same time, you're supposed to, try your best. And there are regulations out there that actually, kind of force you to do the best. Otherwise, you are, potentially affected by this fine, right?
Yeah, no, you really bring up a topic that's really a hot one in the community, because who do you hold attributable to something like this? And the SolarWinds issue and going after the CISO, I think most of us disagree that every company is different, but CISOs are usually underfunded, understaffed, and have too much responsibility. It's a company itself, and they become scapegoats, and so it's easy to do if you're saying, okay, well, the CISO is responsible, the CIO is responsible. Really, it has to be the company. And I think, at least in the U.S., there was some efforts for disclosure, but there was something that was put in originally that would require most companies to have cyber expertise as part of their C-suite. that was thrown out, and I think it's a big mistake. And I think that I think it'll take its natural course. But I think every company that's a middle size or large company now will need to have some sort of cyber expertise to go forward as we get more and more into the digital landscape in the world where everything is connected. So it's not, it's an area where I think if you don't have that, you're more likely to have issues like this. In the case of CrowdStrike, though, I mean, I don't know if you can blame them on this. And patches, like you said early on, are a routine, an everyday thing. And there was an error, but I think there's a buyer beware here too, right? Responsibility of the user to understand what's being patched. So I think everyone's to blame. And the problem goes back again to the systematic risk is that, if we're so easily connected and so easily fall at the same time, and critical infrastructure could be so easily disrupted, all those things at once, do we need to change things? So we have, redundancy or separation or both, to make sure that we don't have a situation like this, because it could be, though again, like this was an error in an update, but this could easily have been a cyber attack that could have done the same thing or worse. So I think, you have to, again, mold those two together, and look at everything holistically.
So that's definitely one of the most interesting part of this overall topic, right? And one final thing that I have in my mind is, once again, I've read a lot of threads online, and some of this started this kind of conversation where they said, oh, in order to prevent another incident like this, just remove your EDR, or just change your EDR, and let's move to something else that is less intrusive in the operating system. And and this, I'm in security operation. My job is to identify and detect incidents so that we can contain them. And my first thoughts was, what happens if the consequence of this very big problem that we had as an industry becomes a larger problem where we don't trust our own security tools. And what do we do if we don't use security tools? Because that's a risk. If we start considering installing an EDR or any other kind of tool a risk per se, is that a bigger risk than actually not having visibility on my own network and my own infrastructure? And maybe we have seen already, you said it, attackers targeting and exploiting this kind of situation, right? For that reason, maybe thinking, okay, at this time, maybe there are some networks, some organizations which are not using that agent anymore, so they are less protected than before. What I don't really know what's worse in this
Well,
case.
I really do think removing your EDR probably would end up being worse. You probably have your data stolen. You'd have ransomware attacks. They could really do a permanent devastation to a company or organization. This is bad enough, but I think the way to do it is build up, not back. And by removing yourself, you turn yourself into a lamb. You're going to find a wolf nearby. So I think so EDR is, but just like every other tool that you use in cybersecurity, it's got to be regularly tested and upgraded and made sure it fits into your orchestration of your mission. So there's a lot of elements to cyber, and I think that it can be really simplified sometimes in the news, but it's a tough world out there, and we're seeing now with AI and other things happening out there that's going to get tougher. When people are basically generating all kinds of code and getting tools openly on the dark web that they could test. It's very asymmetrical, and we continually have to build our defenses.
That's that's very insightful. Thank you so much, Chuck. And we reached unfortunately the end of our episode together. It has been very very interesting to me. As I always said, first of all, I learn a lot by having this kind of conversations and having the opportunity of speaking with such renowned professionals from the field, and I'm just grateful for that. But if anyone else will find this beneficial as well, because they're kind of being part of our conversation, just watching this, or maybe using the comments down below. That's makes it even more valuable for me. So I'm very, very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for educating the public out there. You're doing a great service, because I think we need more of that.
I'm really happy to hear that. And of course, thank you very much to all of the people watching this. Already, what I asked you to do. It's very nice to hear, feedbacks from the field. And there will be some more episodes with some more guests at some point. Maybe Chuck once again. We will see that. But that will be in a while. I'm taking a very small break for next month. So let's keep in touch. And if you don't want to miss the next episode, maybe just subscribe so you will get notified. That's it. Thank you once again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye, everyone.